Thank you, Chris. I want to start by saying that I think in terms of policies that each country needs to adopt a combination of policies to, whether it's carbon taxes or cap and trade or some way to put a price on carbon, in addition to policies that drive markets for renewable energy and building codes and standards and things that improve efficiency, whether it's in buildings, appliances, et cetera, which can help renewables to more rapidly gain a larger share. But in Germany, I think really the policy that has been most effective at advancing renewables as well as reducing carbon emissions has been the feed law. In 2007, I think, well, about 79 million tons of CO2 were avoided according to German estimates because of this law versus about 7 to 9 million tons that were avoided because of emissions trading. And what the feed-in law is it enables people, almost anybody in Germany who wants to install a solar panel on their roof or a wind turbine on their farm to connect to the grid, get guaranteed access to markets, and then they're guaranteed a specific price for every kilowatt hour of electricity they actually produce and feed into the grid. That's even if they end up consuming more than they produce. They get paid for every kilowatt hour they produce at a guaranteed rate for 20 years. And that's determined by how much it costs to produce that electricity and then ensuring that they have a certain rate of return over that. And the reason this has been so effective is banks and others who might be interested in loaning the money know that over a certain period of time they will get a guaranteed rate of return, and it dramatically reduces the risk. So it therefore reduces the interest rates and makes it much easier to get capital. It's driven markets incredibly for a whole range of renewable technologies, not just as in many other countries. Policies have driven primarily wind and others that have been cheapest. Germany is now the world's largest market for solar PV. And as Chris was saying, Germany's solar resource is not very good at best. It averages about what Anchorage, Alaska has over the course of a year, and Germany accounts for more than 50% of the world market for solar PV. Until just this past year, Germany was the world leader in wind capacity and generation. The US just raced past it. Germany, as Chris was saying, went from being a laggard in renewable energy to a leader. In about 2000, Germany got about 6% of its electricity from renewable sources. By 2007, that was up over 14%. And I've heard some estimates for 2008, it may be as high as 18%. And all of this is well ahead of German government targets for 2010. So they actually in 2007 or 2008 adjusted their targets and are now aiming to get, I believe it is 30% of their electricity from renewable sources by 2020 and 45% by 2030. And they see the feed-in tariff as being their primary policy for climate protection. Part of why I think this law has been so successful is because it's really driven development of renewables in Germany, and many times small scale on homes and farms, and because almost anybody can benefit from this type of policy and can make money from it. There are many people who invest in renewable technologies expecting or knowing that over time they will be getting a specific amount of income from it, so they're actually seeing it as being their retirement investment. And as a result, there's been broad public support for renewable energy in Germany, which has helped the government to maintain this policy, and when it's come up for negotiation, actually strengthen it. Even banks have been behind it, pushing for stronger policy. Germany has created about 250,000 jobs in the renewable energy industry because of this law, and there are now very strong domestic industries in renewable energy as a result. And some of the areas of Germany that have actually benefited most with jobs and new industries have been in what were economically depressed regions of Eastern Germany. And even now with the economic crisis, it's greatly because of this policy that the renewable energy jobs in Germany, for example, are considered to be some of the most stable. People are not really concerned about losing their jobs. And the industries are continuing to do well and expect and to see continued growth. And it's greatly because even though there is still concern getting financing, there's less of a concern because of the guaranteed rate of return. And just, I believe it was last year, there are a number of analysts who are ranking the United States ahead of Germany and any other country for investment in renewable energy. And because of the economic downturn, that highest level ranking is now shifted back to Germany because of this policy. And because of Germany's success, there are now something like 50 some countries, states, and provinces that have actually adopted this policy and are following Germany's lead. And that's everywhere from across the European Union, which is where the majority of countries have this policy in place, to a number of countries now in Africa who have adopted it or are looking at it seriously, to Australia where several states have adopted it, across Asia. And now even in the United States, there's been a feed-in tariff type policy that's been introduced into Congress, and several states are looking at it closely. And I just wanted to close by saying that the way policies are designed and implemented is critically important too. So not all of these feed-in tariffs are operating as successfully as in Germany, but it is, as Chris said, important to learn from lessons of other countries, and it's very encouraging to see so many countries are starting to move in this direction.
Thanks, Janet. We have time for a few short questions. Larry Manier, please, Worldwatch board member. Over on the right there.
Thanks. This is basically a comment, Chris. I left the earlier panel mulling over the suggestion that the U.S. ratify the Copenhagen Agreement before it was actually negotiated, which sounds like a non-starter. However, listening to Satu describe the EU process, it seems that in effect what they've done is to do precisely that. So I'm just wondering if we might not come up with a strategy whereby there could be at least a sense of Congress resolution in support of broad principles for Copenhagen, so that there was a bit of momentum on going into the meeting. And then a second question, just quickly, hearing Yingling describe the progress that China has made sort of under the radar reminds me of some of our Worldwatch board meetings lately, where we've talked about the fact that, as she says, a third of the pollution in China is generated by exports, so it's really fed by U.S. consumerism. I'm just wondering if there could be ways in which that message could be gotten across to policymakers so that China is perceived as taking steps to correct some of its environmental practices in a way that might generate more political support for a Copenhagen Agreement.
Well, since Senator Kerry is having dinner with the Worldwatch board tonight, you can take that first suggestion to him directly, Larry. But Yingling, would you like to respond to the second question?